Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and in today's video, guys, there is a lot of Toronto Maple Leafs news to go over ahead of Wednesday's season opener, so let's get to all of it. The previous video that we did here on the channel was going over the Maple Leafs' defensive pairings because they basically had those set before they played their final preseason game against the Detroit Red Wings the other day, and we used a bunch of stats and contextual information to look ahead and maybe what they may be midway through the season, but also to answer certain questions, like why is Jake Muzzin and Justin Holl a pairing again to start the season? So if you want to check out that video, I'll leave a link above the screen and at the end of this one. But by taking a look at their forward lines from practice from the other day, it's very telling what the opening night lineup is going to end up being. We talked about it a couple of videos ago. Nick Robertson was basically doing everything that he needed to do to make this team out of training camp, but there were a couple of things working against him. The first thing being is that Nick Robertson is exempt from waivers. He could be sent down and called up freely without the Maple Leafs having to worry about losing him to another team. And lastly, when we're comparing Robertson to the guy who did get that final forward spot in Dennis Mulligan, Robertson makes $796,000 against the salary cap, and a guy like a Dennis Mulligan makes league minimum, which is $750,000. And, you might be scoffing at that, but like we'll see in a minute, literally every dollar mattered when it came to the Maple Leafs being salary cap compliant for opening night. The Maple Leafs are starting this season with Timothy Liljegren and Jordy Ben on long-term injured reserve and Carl Dahlstrom on season-opening injury reserve, which will help them navigate the salary cap a little bit, but that also means that the earliest that Timothy Liljegren can come back from his injury will be after the Maple Leafs have played 10 games or 24 days of the NHL calendar have passed, which means that he'll probably be back either the first or second week of November. We're almost done talking about all the salary cap shenanigans that the Maple Leafs had to pull in order to be ready for Wednesday's season opener, but it still remains a very real possibility that if John Tavares isn't ready to play on Wednesday night, that the Maple Leafs could be playing with a 19-man roster, a man short, 11 forwards, and 6 defensemen. With a 20-man roster, the Maple Leafs have just $4 in salary cap space. So if John Tavares is not ready to go Wednesday night, and he himself said a couple of days ago that he doesn't necessarily want to rush himself back, and the Maple Leafs about a week and a half ago said that it was going to be 3 weeks minimum, and things are always subject to change, but still, if he's not ready to go, that means they'll have to play a man short in the season opener, and then the next day, they can use an emergency recall to presumably call up Nick Robertson and be cap compliant and have 20 skaters. If you've been a subscriber of this channel for a couple of weeks or even months or years, the possibility, or even I guess now the reality, of the Maple Leafs having to play with a shortened roster to begin the season isn't really surprising because we've touched on it a couple of times. And I was frustrated then, and I'm frustrated now because it makes it, how close they are to the salary cap makes it very difficult to improve the team at all from this point onwards. And I'm sure they'll be creative with it, like they are every year, but it makes it very difficult to make any sort of in-season trades or deals at the deadline to improve this team without first moving money off of the roster. I know there was some confusion surrounding the emergency recall rules because a couple of years ago during the shortened year when we had the Canadian division, they changed them so that you can make an emergency recall on the day of a game that you knew that you were going to be short for, but they've since went back to the old rules. You got to play a game short, then you can recall someone, I believe, making $850,000 or less, and it doesn't count towards your salary cap. So if you were a bit bummed out that Nick Robertson had 8 points in 5 preseason games and still didn't make the season opening lineup, know that he will be in the lineup, more than likely anyway, for the home opener on Thursday night against the Washington Capitals. If the injury to John Tavares was going to be longer, they would have just placed him on LTIR, and then we wouldn't have to worry about playing Wednesday's season opener a man short. But because he's not going to miss anywhere close to 10 games and 24 days on the NHL schedule, it doesn't make sense to put him on LTIR and have him sitting there healthy for games that he could be playing in. You have to miss both 10 games and 24 days on the NHL schedule, and if you're not going to be out that long, there's no point in having him just sit there. Part of the reason why the Maple Leafs have just $4 in salary cap space is because they signed Zach Aston Reese to a contract. He came into camp on a PTO, and this is a guy who made $1.7 million last season. He is taking a pretty steep discount to play with the Toronto Maple Leafs here. But he got Selke votes a couple of years ago. He's a very good defensive forward, and he throws a ton of hits. I think he's going to be a lot of fun to watch out there. And I'll get more into my expectations for the players and the lines in my season preview video, which I should have out either tomorrow or Wednesday morning. But that $840,630 number is absolutely hilarious. And it's part of the reason why, again, the Maple Leafs have $4 in salary cap space. There was a lot of number crunching going on. In other news, yesterday, the Maple Leafs placed Wayne Simmons, Kyle Clifford, Adam Gaudette, and Victor Mete all on waivers. And today, they all cleared. And that's surprising because that's like the first time in years that the Maple Leafs have placed a bunch of players on waivers to start the season and haven't had anyone claimed. I heard this on the Steve Dangle podcast a while ago, but apparently the reason why every time the Maple Leafs placed a guy on waivers, he would just get claimed is because it was a running joke in the NHL. Other general managers thought it would just be funny if they just claimed everyone that the Maple Leafs put on waivers. And I mean, if they got a laugh out of it, fine. But there's nothing funny about having serviceable depth players, and guys like Adam Gaudette and Victor Mete will probably see games with the Maple Leafs this year, here and there as they're needed. Even a guy like Kyle Clifford. What this also means is that after a couple of down years, the Toronto Marlies are looking pretty stacked this year. So if you've ever been to a game, or if you've never been to one and you're living the GTA, it's pretty cheap and it's usually pretty exciting. And if the team's going to be good, they're going to make the playoffs. And if they make the playoffs and go on a run, well, that helps develop all the prospects that are down there. As for Wayne Simmons, Elliot Friedman put this tweet out yesterday saying that Toronto has let it be known that he is available in a trade. And because he's already cleared through waivers, he's got some extra flexibility in terms of his options. He can be called up and sent down as many times in the next 30 days. So it should make the process a little bit easier there. But this isn't about, getting like a draft pick or a prospect back in return for this guy. It's just about doing right by the player, a player that did a lot for the city and its communities and the organization. And it's unfortunate. This is a guy who plays extremely hard. He's in his mid-30s at this point. He suffered a lot of injuries. If there's an opportunity for him to play elsewhere, I'd be happy to see him get that. Simmons was always a very talented and easy to root for player, but over his last 2 seasons here in Toronto, you could really see the injuries catching up to him, and he slowed down even more. His hands aren't what they used to be. It's tough, but like I said, if there's an opportunity for him to play elsewhere, I'd want him to get that. The Maple Leafs are currently sitting at 50 out of 50 contract slots right now, so if they end up trading Wayne Simmons for like future considerations, then that would open up a slot for them. You never want to be right at 50 out of 50 because it makes it difficult to make trades in season, to work the waiver wire yourself if there's a guy that you want to pick up off of waivers, to sign an international free agent or even a college free agent later on in the season. It gives them a little bit more flexibility. One more thing before we end off the video here. It was announced that Matt Murray is going to be the starter for Wednesday's season opener in Montreal, which means that Ilya Samsonov is going to get the nod in the second half of that back-to-back for the Maple Leafs home opener against his former team, the Washington Capitals, which is going to be an exciting one for obvious reasons. But both goalies having strong to decent preseasons. It's just the preseason, but like Nick points out here, you'd rather have a good one than a bad one. And I'm sure it's a storyline that we're going to be following all year round, and we're going to go more in depth on the goalies, of course, in the season preview video, which should be out either Tuesday or Wednesday morning. So look for that then. And that's about going to do it for this video, guys. There's a lot of little odds and ends that we wrapped up here. We basically know what the starting lineup is going to be. Obviously, watch for John Tavares being in or out of the lineup then. I'm sure we'll talk about it if we get that news in the next couple of days in another video. But for now, that's going to be it for this one. Make sure to like the video if you did like it and subscribe for more, because more is always on the way. And guys, I'll see you again in the next one.